For joining, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. And we are live now on Facebook. You can use the hashtag XQuest to ask any questions on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube to our panelists and to myself regarding either sustainability or exponential tech or both. How do we actually scale sustainability fast? And is the sustainability the way we want to go? So to open this webinar, hi Omar, welcome. So to open this webinar, we will kind of start with a short year in review of Afforest for Future, as this is our second birthday and we are very, very happy to share it with all of you. So I'll do a quick share of screen and just try to make our journey what it was for the past year and how it was, how we see it exponentially scaling. And then we'll go back to our panel. So this year in review for us, now we are working on both desert greening, which is our patented methodology. We have a partnership developed with a company that's working on wastewater processing, creating both soil and water for us. And we are working on the first AI platform for desert greening. So it all happened in 1 year. And even though it started as a research project at the TU Wien, working on sedimentation and what sedimentation is and which problems it creates in the reservoirs worldwide. We also looked into deserts for this project, and this was what we were working on before the start of last year. Because today it takes you from 10 to 15 years to create soil in the desert. And then with our patent methodology, it takes only 1 day because we are using this alluvium to create the soil, transporting it from the reservoirs. And this was basically our concept before the start of the last year. Before we were solely focused on one project, which was Egypt. We were focused on one lake, the Aswan High Dam Reservoir. It has huge potential, nevertheless, still it has the potential to green the size of Latvia in Egypt with one forest and seek huge amounts of carbon. But before we went to Singularity, this was our sole focus. And then last year, we actually had, we went to Singularity University and we spent the whole summer at NASA Ames. And this kind of changed our whole perspective on our project and on what we can do to actually exponentially scale our impact to sustainability. This was our main takeaway from the SU. So we looked much more broader. We looked at the whole world, and we looked at there is no one single dam in the desert. There is no one single lake, but there are actually millions. And this visualization only shows the large dams, while there are still small and medium dams worldwide. So we kind of shifted our perspective from only one lake in Egypt to focusing worldwide. And we researched that actually by 2050, we're about to lose 42% of them due to siltation. So this kind of made us even more focused that we really have to stop and really see how we can amplify our efforts to prevent all the hydropower losses, the world, the irrigation losses and people losses in general. We were so happy to become part of the SU Ventures and there actually learn more about market research and how to scale our impact. And this actually shifted our perspective from this one project into something much bigger. So with them, we developed our strategy of a data platform, and then we flew to Dubai and we got the pilot in Dubai, and then scaling with partnerships, which we are still developing to have the mega project in Egypt still, but in 2025, much more realistic, and then to focus on terraforming Earth by 2030. So this is our path now. From SF to Dubai, thanks to Georg. And then we went to Dubai Future Accelerators, which was an amazing experience for the three of us. We're so lucky that Dubai government actually understood what we are doing and was very welcoming to us. So we signed a memorandum of understanding with them, with Dubai municipality and the Sheikh Hamdan. And we're now working on the first pilot in Dubai now. We were also lucky that this year we won the Katerva award as the environmental startup of the year. So this is an award that Ethereum won last year. It's pretty cool. We were also featured in Fast Company, and we are working with an incredible network of both academic supporters like the University of Adelaide, University of Cairo, Technical University of Vienna, and Singularity University, as well as with industrial partners like Freiland and Planet and Gramont, but also being part of climate-kic, being part as an NVIDIA startup, AI startup, SU Ventures, Climate Launchpad. Really, Dubai Future Accelerator is really, really incredible support, and we see this like really accelerating our growth and accelerating our impact as well. So pulling the future faster forward, this is the slogan of Dubai Future Accelerators, but it's something that we took very dear to our hearts and something that we see as a very important like thought to have always in your head, just to think, how can we really accelerate this? So with this, actually, I want to open our panel discussion, like how do we scale the sustainability? So welcome everyone again. Our panelists, Georg Fuerlinger from the Wirtschaftskammer Österreich, Johannes Naimer-Stach from climate-kic Austria, Cunningham from Revitalization Youth, Maher Ezzeddine from Irianco, hi Maher, Raymond from Singularity University, hi Ray, and Lulu from Climate Defense Fund, hi, and Omar from Sultan Ventures, Hawaii. Good morning, Omar.
Good morning.
Hi, everyone. So I would really like to open this panel with just like one question to each of you. How do you see yourself actually promoting sustainability and scaling sustainability in your daily lives? Yes, please, Storm.
Well, at the risk of highly offending everybody here, I don't really promote sustainability. I think sustainability is what we should have been doing for the last 200 or 300 years, but we didn't. And now the world is so depleted, polluted, degraded, that really the only way we can have a sustainable future is by restoration. You know, revitalizing the cities we've already developed, replenishing the natural resources we've depleted. There's just no way that, I mean, the normal sustainability mode is reducing the amount of harm we do, reducing the amount of pollution, reducing the amount of energy use and waste. You know, reducing our way to the future, you know, isn't going to make it as far as improving the future. We have to undo the damage, not just slow the rate at which we're damaging the world. And one of the, you asked earlier about how do we scale this up, and I love this whole idea that you have of taking the muck, which is mostly topsoil, from behind the dams and using it to reforest arid places. And to me, the best way to scale that up is via integration. My work on a daily basis is with mostly revitalizing, economically revitalizing communities and regions and helping them restore their natural resources. One of the major aspects of that is dam removal. So it seems like a very natural integration here that if people are already trying to figure out how are we going to fund dam removal in order to restore our fisheries and our recreational abilities on the rivers, how are we going to fund it? How are we going to get political support? If you can add the revitalization of the local agricultural economy to that whole mix, I think you'll get a lot more funding and a lot more political support simply by integrating that sediment use into their overall restoration revitalization plans.
Totally. I mean, I really agree with you. And of course, this is because we're working on this it's as our focus. But on the other hand, destroying dams, like I think we need to start looking more as like the holistic approach as you are. So every dam that gets removed, it releases a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere. This is like the first thing, the destruction of the dam. So just of course, there is a lot of integration and a lot of restoration that is part of the dam removal. But restoring the dams without removing them, actually restoring the ecosystem around them, just by trying to kind of recreate what it was, so the biomimicry approach. I think this is one of the softer approaches to actually really having a huge impact in this domain. Yeah.
No, I wasn't saying to destroy all dams.
Right.
I'm just saying that dam removal is a major global trend right now.
Yeah.
This is a way to integrate with it and take advantage of it.
So, Maher, do you want to jump in from UAE? How do you see it? I mean, you do have dams there. Unmute yourself. Maher, I think you're muted. Okay.
Yes, I unmuted myself just right now. As you already know, Vasela, we integrated sustainability into our company, into the core of the company since day one, since 1999. So sustainability is a core pillar within our company. And we started in 1999 by giving back to the community with a small amount of money. And moving forward till today's date, now we allocate every year roughly about $100,000 to give back to the community. So this is the sustainability that we have internally. But we also provide a sustainability service, which is going towards the end user, hence our interaction with climate change and renewable energy. And with that, we've been engaged with really cool selective projects. One of them is the automotive industry, and this notion of moving into a transformational mode within the automotive industry to becoming more of an electric vehicle, where we took this to the next level. So currently today we're living more of a transitional mode, which is a hybrid mode of the electric vehicle. And the way we see the future, us as a company, we don't see it in the battery business whatsoever. We see it in the infrastructure. So we went even further, and we started to integrate really cool technology with artificial intelligence and blockchain into a membrane that can speak to the car, and car can go ahead and speak back to the membrane. This membrane is being paved on the actual road. A very smart membrane with nodes that can speak to each other, but also can emit energy back to the vehicle. And this energy, basically, it will feed the vehicle indefinitely with power to move from point A to point B to point C, as long as this membrane is on the road being paved. So this is how we see sustainability being on the exponential side, moving in that direction, rather than having, so we basically place the battery as a backup, in the car, rather than saying, this is the core of the car, which is battery. We said, no, this is not the core of the car. We're not going that direction. We prefer to go ahead and reinvent the infrastructure. So there's an arm of a government, private sector being engaged in that, and the business model is comparable to the existing oil and gas business model, except there's no more oil and gas. It's a smart system that emits energy in the form of magnetic field to the car, and it creates this sort of momentum to keep the car up and running. So sustainability, just to go back to the core of the conversation, sustainability had been implemented since day one as a pillar, as a core pillar. We keep being engaged in sustainability. Of course, we're very much engaged as well with the Ministry of Climate Change in the UAE and other limited number of ministries that exist in the world. The other day, I went to Wikipedia to see how many ministries exist in the world, which is related to Ministry of Climate Change, and I found only 5. So it's a small number of ministries, but the cool thing is that they're taking action and moving in a cool direction. And we're living that sort of momentum with them.
Yeah, no, I think it's very interesting how, like, outside of UAE, people usually perceive UAE as as a country that's really not looking into sustainability. It's not actually investing in this direction at all. But I think it's really interesting that we're the first country to have the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment, and definitely the first country to have the Ministry of Artificial Intelligence. So there is a lot to learn from a small but yet very impactful country. I am totally
Yeah,
impressed.
the cool thing about the UAE, Vasila, is that it's especially Dubai government. It's a very entrepreneurial government, and they're taking risks, and they're becoming, as a country, as United Arab Emirates, it's becoming more independent from oil and gas by injecting the entrepreneurial, the innovative ecosystem into the picture. Hence, the Ministry of Climate Change and other cool ministries like the Ministry of Artificial Intelligence, the Ministry of Youth, the Ministry of Happiness in the country. So really, they're doing some cool things in the country, and I admire what they've done so far, and I admire the next 20. Well, I look forward for the next 20 years.
I mean, I think the same is with China. Like Lulu, like you can say the best, but like I'm totally impressed what China is doing right now. Could you please?
Yes, also I think it's part of that is because of the population, the magnitude. China has a huge population base, so even each one of the single person do a little bit, it's exponentially result in something big. My background is basically from an NGO focusing on environment and climate change. And so recently we're doing a lot of work on promoting what we called a fourth wave of environmental protection. So the idea was like the first wave of environmental protection happened early last century, because people realized environment are damaged. So the government started to build nature conservative or national park to protect it. And the second wave is about 60s of last century, people trying to use law as a weapon to sue the, probably, for example, the enterprises who's harming the environment. So that's the second wave. The third wave is basically what I'm doing right now, and what China is focusing a lot is market mechanism. So to use market as a way to solve the problem. Last year, December, China launched the largest carbon market in the world. 5 billion tons will be covered by 2020. Because if you sue people, you build national conservation, it's not really, it's very time consuming. And I'm not saying all the other ways are not working. All different ways are important, but we have to find a sustainable way for the environment action to keep working. One way is to collaborate with enterprises. So market is a way to give enterprises flexibility and give them tools and give them ways to solve their pollution issue and also still gain profit. And the fourth wave is what's happening right now, is innovation enable people to take action. So we see that a lot. Like TNC right now is using facial recognition to help Indonesia fishermen to catch fishes. And we EDF are working with Google to track block level air quality issue in California, Oakland. So all of that is what we're facing right now to help. All of these technologies are actually helping everybody, people's, government, enterprises, NGOs, universities, everybody, to give them a way to act in a daily life, which we don't have, which people don't have the access to technology before. So that's what I find is amazing, and what you are doing as well.
Thanks. Thanks. I think like also like just to continue the thought, I shifted to you, Raymond, because like Singularity and you yourself are working on so many different technologies that will actually enable us this transition. And I just want to hear what you think. Are we going to shrink ourselves soon or not?
Well, it's always so interesting. I think sometimes we look at these things and we say, if only we could shrink ourselves, the economies of scale we could get out of that. If only everybody would become a vegetarian, you know, the things that we could go ahead and save, the way that we do all the things with our food production system. But nobody really wants to shrink themselves or become a vegetarian or etc. Or very few people do. But then we find these really interesting ways to sort of get around this. I've been concentrating recently on a lot of the work that we do, how food production really hits the environment, and some of the new things that are coming down the line, for instance, with cellular agriculture, the ability to go ahead and grow meat without harming an animal, without actually harming the environment or decreasing it by maybe 100-fold, the amount of water used, the amount of CO2 that's produced. I think that has got a real future, both economically and the fact that, for instance, China is bringing on a whole new set of people who want to, have that Western style diet with lots of meat. And we don't have any other way to provide that without having like 4 Earths worth of grazing pasture. And then whenever you go on from there, just the ways that we're able to go ahead and use some of these new technologies like synthetic biology and really have this possibility to do terraforming, not on Mars, it'll happen first here on Earth, like you guys propose, and to be able to both remediate the environment and do carbon capture in different ways. There's this great paper, and I'll post it to our chat piece, where a company in Canada has just come up with a nice old-fashioned engineering way to go ahead and do direct air capture of carbon dioxide. And previously that's been like $500 a ton. And they've been able to show that they can do it and demonstrate it for under $100 a ton, which is still expensive, but it gets it more within the realm of possibility. And that's the last thing I'll say. Really, all of this is bringing to bear these new technologies because the old solutions, won't work. This is what Storm was saying. Whenever you just do a straight line extrapolation of any of our problems, just cutting back or trying to remediate isn't going to cut it. We're going to have to come up with new solutions. But what's really, I think, going on is we need new social solutions. Right now, it's all tragedy of the commons, the things that people do with the environment, with pollution, and that then the whole world has to deal with, and we don't have ways to look at those costs as a global community.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more, and especially when you're talking about like social solutions. I think, well, not because I live in Austria, but I think like Austria is really trying their best, and I know like Georg and both Johannes are like working partially connected to government, but Georg, you yourself are working for like Austrian Business Chamber, so you can like maybe share more how your view on all this and what's your contribution.
Sure, happy to. So thanks for having me part of this exclusive panel here. So yeah, as I said, as you said, I'm working for the Trade Commission, running the office here in San Francisco, Silicon Valley. And it's interesting to look at the concept of sustainability with kind of 2 different eyes. One with like kind of the Austrian eye, basically coming from a country, a very rich country, developed country, where there's actually the resources, also the awareness that sustainability is important. So I think we're one of the countries in Europe that get most of their energy from sustainable resources, mainly water. And there's a lot of policy actions taken and a lot of framework conditions made for actually having a more sustainable business landscape, for example. But yeah, so maybe that's one point of it. And maybe one general thing, but a trend that I see, regardless of whether I'm talking to companies in Austria or here in Silicon Valley, is that awareness that when it comes to doing business, it's not so much only a double bottom line, meaning I create value for the customer and I create profit for the company or some other kind of value when it is a non-profit organization, but the notion of the triple bottom line, that there has to be kind of a third pillar that you actually have to take into consideration when doing business or when running an organization with a certain mission, namely to have some kind of positive effect on the environment or on the society as a whole. And so it's at the end, it's a choice from the customers on who they want to do business with. Is it just the best price, or do I take a closer look at the company that I'm buying from, right? Whether they have certain processes or certain kind of rules in place that make sure that are not just delivering the value to a great price, but they also have an eye on that kind of long-lasting effects that they have with their business. So interesting trend that we see here in the US is this B Corps. So basically you can certify yourself as an organization that does good. You know, there are certain criteria on how you have to be treating your coworkers, how you have to treat the environment, your local community, and so on and so forth. And it's a voluntary kind of like certification, but we see more and more companies actually taking that certification, and actually customers paying a lot of attention on where they're buying from, if they have the resources to decide actually where to go. So in the developing countries, I think it's a different story. There is, when it's simply about survival, you don't think, or you're not able to think too much about sustainability if you're thinking about feeding your family, right? So I think this is still a notion that where the developed world still has to step in and take a leading role here. And maybe one last point to that, what Raymond said, I think it's also like this kind of clean meat movement, where you basically create or like craft meat without growing chicken or cows and then slaughter them for the meat, but growing it in a lab in a more sustainable fashion. I think these are kind of technologies that we see a lot of investment flowing in here in Silicon Valley, and so that's where I see technology coming in handy to provide solutions to some of the most challenging problems that we face.
Thank you, Georg. Yeah. I mean, I also, like, I know because you're working for the business side, especially this, of course, this is like very important for us environmentalists. You're always like, oh yeah, it has to, like, the three bottom line is very important. But sometimes it's like this duality that like the business people just see profit and how to look at that part. So it's very cool that this like is changing the mindset. But for the people from the NGO sector and environmentalists, like for us, it's like this profit part is always disregarded. I know like Omar has been always a very good critic of me looking into more money side of things. So could you please share more how Sultan Ventures is looking into everything from Hawaii? Yeah?
Sure. So we're a venture firm out here in Hawaii, and we invest in breakthrough innovations. And I guess if you look at what sustainability means, well, if you look at the 17 UN SDGs, right, how many of them have to do with sustainability? It's kind of a trick question, right? All of them have to do with sustainability in one fashion or another. I think many of the other panelists already touched upon this, but if we're going to solve exponential problems like the ones that are in that list that's 17, it's not going to be linear solutions that solve those problems, right? You can't end global hunger. You can't have linear solutions addressing things that are in and of itself limited resources, right? So unless Raymond solves this problem for all of us with his genetic engineering, we're gonna be dealing with limited resources, right? So what does that mean? That means you have to, as an investor, the viewpoint that we take on it is that it shouldn't be one or the other, right? You shouldn't be just supporting things that have a return on investment. You should also be looking at things that also have a return on impact for the environment, for people, et cetera. So double bottom line, triple bottom line type of investments. And that means putting our money where our mouth is, right? So in order to promote the development of these breakthrough innovations, you have to provide them with an enormous amount of risk capital and be willing to try to funnel those innovations. So will reducing plastic consumption help with that? Probably not. Elimination is what we need to be looking at, right? In a place like Hawaii out here, obviously anything that has environmental impact is a huge, huge concern. They literally shut down a $500 million project because of the environmental impact that it might have on the state. So kind of, in a way, I feel like we're at the heart of sustainability, right?
I mean, that's so very, very happy to hear that, because yeah, Hawaii is like a living paradise, start of paradise. But Joe, so like you're the last one standing, but I know that you're like really doing this all day, every day. You live and breathe sustainability. So tune in, please.
Well, thank you. First of all, happy birthday, Afforest. Since like I've been knowing you for much longer than 2 years now, I feel like a bit like the midwife here. I was already in good contact and with you when you started your venture. Basically, that's also the thing that I have been doing for the last years, working with people, because I feel we need to create a movement, a very, very strong movement that is consisting of lots of people. I see that lots of people, young people, really want to do something about sustainability. They realize that their lives are potentially lasting so much longer that eventually they will become a victim of an unsustainable way of how the economy is run. So I also, like Lulu, we share the same story of being a part of an NGO. I was a climate change expert at WWF, and from then I realized that there's a silo that we never talked, and that was basically businessmen. So I switched sides, and I'm now talking a lot with the potential business people. And I enjoy building the bridge between these two silos. And I do believe we need to break up these silos in a lot of aspects, teaching those that really are focused on doing business, that are really good at it, on focusing also on the sustainability part of the whole thing, and making it aware. Maybe at one point it only helps to draw the attention to that point, but mostly, as I am also working as a mentor, I need to kind of, or we need to be around and help them guide their ways. And at the same time, something that was maybe unthinkable 10 years ago in Central Eastern Europe, just like in Austria, you need to tell those people that are really aware and that maybe also really have the best technology or the best know-how, that they can make something that creates monetary value as well with their sustainable ideas. So bringing these all together is also why I ended up working for climate-kic here, because they are KIC, K-I-C stands for Knowledge and Innovation Community, meaning bringing together people that usually don't talk to each other too much, and then creating consortium that potentially can go beyond incremental innovation, but rather really focus on the innovation that are needed. And that is kind of what I have been doing for a long time. And I do think breaking up silos and directing our attention to 2100 maybe, and understanding how we want the world to look like in 2100 is kind of better understanding where we need to go, and not only focusing on reducing plastics, just as you said, Omar, but really eliminating it, not so focusing on the real problems. That's the thing.
So yeah, I just now that we've all introduced ourselves, and we can just open the panel to like just random talks. And I know, Storm, you yourself have a lot on silos, and I've listened to a few of your talks on actually breaking silos or not breaking silos. So what do you see now? Like, this is a question both to you, Storm, and to everyone. Like, what do you see could be the way, not just for Forest for Future and us, but generally for societies in our networks and the countries where we live, where we work, on either cross-pollinating these networks, or how do we actually have an impact, or what can we do now that will have an impact, that can help scale either sustainability or the just global good that we leave? Yeah. Anyway.
It's not on, oh, there we go.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. The two major things. One is that in order to break silos, we really have to stop thinking about the silos themselves. It's really more a matter of finding common interests. And several of the speakers here have mentioned the importance of tying all this to economic growth. One of the most common reasons organizations bring me in to keynote their conferences is to help them think outside their silos. I mean, they say this right up front. You know, they like Preservation Maryland. You know, when I keynoted a conference they did last year, and they said, help us get out of our historic preservation silo so we can become more integrated into the revitalization of our community, so that people won't just think of us as being about historic buildings. You know, they don't want to be just about assets. They want to be about the process. And that's the other key thing, is that most communities, most regions that say they want sustainability or resilience or economic growth or, you know, whatever their primary goal is, you know, revitalization in general, you know, revitalization being defined as economic growth that improves quality of life and environmental health. If that's what they want, you know, why doesn't anybody have a process for it? You know, if you talk to anybody, any professional in any field, they'll say in order to reliably produce something, whether it's automobiles or peanut butter or soap, you got to have a process. Everybody in the business world knows this, but you talk to governmental people, you know, they talk to mayors or governors. What's your process for producing revitalization or resilience? And there is none. There's no process. It's just a bunch of disconnected actions. And so helping places develop a process for achieving these larger goals automatically provides the niche opportunities for all of these silos to dive in and say, there's my part in the process. But if there's no process, there's nothing for them to fit into. So we've got to get into this project by project, stop-start mode, and start thinking in terms of programs, ongoing programs that have an actual underlying process.
I know, for example, that Omar, you've been working very closely with the governor of Hawaii there, and that there are processes like, I guess this is why Hawaii is in such good shape environmentally. What do you think is the situation there?
Sorry, what the question? Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So what do you think about the process in Hawaii and generally like the government support of Hawaii towards like sustainability or like scaling sustainability? Because I know you closely work with the governor.
Yeah. So looking at the panelists, and I'm going to guess for the attendees as well, I would venture to say that I am probably in the most geographically isolated landmass in the world right now. And so obviously we don't have a choice for sustainability. And so what that means is that when we work with the governor, we actively work on policy changes to help support sustainability. And that can take many forms, right? That can take the form of, let's see, what's today, July 3rd? July 1st, the state actively banned all plastic bags in grocery stores. And I know in many of the other areas that you folks are in, that's already happened, right? But it was a big step here. They tried to ban plastic straws, but it was met with resistance, oddly, despite the fact that there's these videos that go all over the internet about people pulling straws out of the nostrils of turtles, and turtles are very, very sacred here in Hawaii. It met resistance, right? So it didn't actually pass through. Policy changes can also mean supporting, putting in place frameworks to support innovation. And you think, well, what do the two have to do with each other? Just like some of the other panelists mentioned, you can't look at this in silos, right? You have to look at it holistically. So policies that support innovation help create those breakthrough technologies, those exponential technologies that help tackle and address sustainability, not just issues, but like the things that will arise in the future. So you have to take a very, very holistic view as to tackle this, right? And I think that's that's where we primarily focus our efforts when we work with the governor and then other legislature folks, senators and reps here in the state.
Because I know once you've mentioned, and that was like really shocking to me, that like Hawaii only has food and water supplies for like 6 days because it gets all the food from the mainland. Like,
yep. So we have about a 6-7 day supply of food if like the ports were cut off. So after 9/11, the ports were actually shut down for security reasons, and I think for like 2-3 days. So it is a real issue. We only have enough food on the islands, and you think about this is paradise. We only have enough that'll last 6 to 7 days, and then after that we're SOL, as they say.
yeah. Like, because this is like a clear, you know, like for me this would always was like a clear call for action, something that you can actually change very easily just by having a bit more support from the government to kind of shift the food production or like imports from the mainland.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the problem, though. I think we'd all agree that capitalism is driving the economy right now, right? And it's looked at singularly. It's not looked at why can't we have return on investment and be sustainable? And I think that's a growing problem, especially amongst developing countries who are trying to get, online, so to speak. They're driven by that capitalism. They're not driven by sustainability.
Yeah. You're free to join, Joe, whenever. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe to add to this, I think for the developing countries, it's kind of also a chance to not make the same mistake that the developed world has done. They don't have to go to all the single steps and actually pollute our environment so that everybody has a car with like huge engines. So I think innovation and technology plays a very crucial role here in order to prevent them from doing the same mistakes. So basically leap over these kind of development steps and go right into the future developments by adopting new technologies that are more environmental friendly or that are not just dividing us as a society and so on and so forth. Having said that, on the other hand, though, I'm fortunate to come from a developed country and don't know it myself, but I've talked to many people coming from developing countries. You still have more this kind of economic pressure, in order to live your life and to maintain a family or whoever you're maintaining. And I think then it's much harder to actually incorporate the thoughts of sustainability in your life when daily needs are not met, right? So that's when government comes in again with an important role to basically provide the framework in which this development can happen and should happen. And it's kind of also a responsibility for the developed world who has the means and the resources and the know-how to actually lead the way in that in this regard and support that development process.
Yeah. I think Lulu and Maher are like really working in this niche of like bringing this knowledge in, right, Lulu?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing I totally agree. That government really play a key role in this issue in developing world, because you really need to, because the people a lot of time they have pressure to get their daily bread and they don't really care about the environment right now. So the government really need to give the idea to the people that even if you won't, because there are a lot of mechanisms that really helps, like we can subsidize you, or if you do something good, you can still earn your daily money. And also another way is for the enterprise to step in. For example, one way we're doing this is we collaborate with Walmart. Walmart is one of the biggest retailer that have their total revenue and sales is basically exceed the following 9. So they just announced 1 billion tons of CO2 reduction goal. They are not doing it by themselves. They're doing it through the supply chain. So they're asking more than 500 of their suppliers to comply with their own standards. And a lot of their suppliers are right now in China. So it really helps the small scale enterprises to transform to a more sustainable way because they have this type of pressure. And also it helps because a lot of people are talking about like competitiveness between countries. So if China set this really strict rule to its own enterprises, they will move to somewhere else, like Vienna or surrounding countries. But if Walmart is doing this, there's no way they can. So the Walmart is doing this for all of their suppliers, no matter whether you're in China or Vienna or Thailand. So that actually also solved the leakage issue.
Yeah. Maher? Yeah. Can you tune in? I know that you're working both in US and UAE.
Yeah, no worries. To be honest with you, the core, we strongly believe, and I agree with Lulu with what she just said right now, the core driver of change for us is the private sector. And we truly believe the private sector is well, currently and will be taking a leading role, and the government has no other choice but to follow. With that in mind, so I know that Lulu mentioned Walmart and other giants out there, but the way we see it as well, it's the entrepreneurs, the young people that care so much about the environment. So the values of people between the age of 8 to the age of 18 or 24, and the upcoming the next generation of people are gonna lead the world. Their values are completely different than our values and than the traditional mindset that we're working with today. So us as a company, to be honest with you, we find it very difficult to work with a traditional mindset to reinvent them, to go ahead and make them to change. Whereas it's so easy for us to make this change with the young, the youth, the entrepreneurs that are really making an exponential amount of change. So we work with entrepreneurs from all over the world. As you already know, Vessela, we've done this during the World Future Energy Summit here in Abu Dhabi, in the United Arab Emirates. And this is when we attracted roughly about 364 entrepreneurs from all over the world. And out of which, 16 entrepreneurs received $47 million of investment intent from investors that came as far as China, Silicon Valley, and European Union. This is strictly focusing on climate change. Now we go to the US. Believe it or not, the uncertainties that exist in the economy in the US is creating some sort of an entrepreneurship spirit. And this entrepreneurship spirit, and by the way, the uncertainties that's being led by the government, by the White House, it's causing this, entrepreneurship spirit, which is really nice. So although the government in the US pulled out of the Paris Agreement, if you think about it indirectly, it's causing the private sector to react in a positive way and to compete with the European companies to go ahead and say, we're going to take a leading role on renewable energy, on sustainability, and we're going to show the world that we're going to be one of the leaders out there in the hope that they make it. And the entrepreneurs, the young people really are causing this change. If you go to Silicon Valley or California in general, the state of California, and I think George is in California, as he mentioned. So you really feel it there. So to answer your question, I truly believe the youth, the young people, are going to be the key drivers of change, and it's definitely part of the private sector umbrella.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more, and of course this is why I'm working with startups. This is why I was part of Flix, and I was really honored to be invited and to share that journey with you, because it was really, really so nice to see so many young people interested in working with sustainability, and especially in GCC region in UAE. It's always really dear to my heart to see how the mindset have shifted completely, from this oil and the very polluting kind of type of old thinking to completely new, and it's completely refreshing. But so if we look at all our stories now, and all our narratives that are very different, but yet we're the panelists, I think our panelists really in alliance, we're all really working towards sustainability. So it's not that we can have big disagreements. But what would be the narrative that we would like to create? What would be the story that we would like to create? The story that can be accepted and understood the same in China, in US, and in UAE, and in Europe. But the story that would be important for us to share is like, how can we leave an impact, and how can we accelerate the adoption of sustainability? Raymond?
I think fundamentally,
yeah.
I think fundamentally we have to stop looking at it as an either or, right?
Mm-hmm.
But look at it as a and. It has to be a both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It has to be not, it's sustainable, not sustainable, but just the regular business that we do, that lives that we live, it should be incorporated into everyday activities, and not even think about whether it's a question or not. It should be mainstream, and it should be incorporated, as I said, in the daily activities. But obviously this will take some time. So efforts like this and initiatives like yours, Vesela, but also this webinar will help to increase awareness. And I also agree with Maher that the new generation will play a leading role here, not only by starting sustainable initiatives or NGOs, but also picking their employer and what they're doing, picking basically the producers and what they're producing. And so everyone has a choice, right? On what they're buying, where they're working, who they're working with, who they encourage their friends to work with, and so on and so forth. So I think it's really a bottom-up movement that will hopefully develop into kind of a mainstream movement all around the world.
But do you think that, sorry?
Yeah, and I have to excuse myself in about 5 minutes. I have another call then at 12.
Yeah, no problem. But do you see, so now that it's important for us to kind of like look at the young generations and maybe educate them not only in school, but also educate them in business and educate them on actually like sustainable businesses, like starting even like elementary school. In Austria or in Serbia, like there are no schools that teach actually business and that teach you to kind of think about having your own business, and of course having an impactful business is still very far out. But would this maybe be a way forward? I don't know.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Maher.
No, please finish your thought because you have to leave.
Just to connect to what Joe said before, that and I see this in my home country, Austria, and I think that's maybe a Central European or European trait. You always focus on the technology and you tinker around and try to create a great solution for a problem, and then you think you might have it, and then you still continue working on it, and then when it's perfect, you start selling it. You know, but at that time, maybe the problem has changed, and maybe nobody's interested in that solution anymore because there's a much better solution out of China or out of Africa or somewhere else. So to that point, I think the same as sustainability, business should be part of whatever you're doing. Whether you're selling pens or you develop a technology to green the desert, you always have to have a business mindset, but not business in terms to maximize your profits, but business in terms to what Storm said, thinking of processes and how to get that solution to that problem out there in a most efficient and effective way in order to bring that solution to the world that actually will help to make the lives better of so many people. So I see business mindset and business acumen more a tool and more a method to achieve your certain end, your mission, whatever that mission might be, and it hopefully is a mission which has the triple bottom line and not just profit in mind. That's how I see the importance of business.
Thank you, Georg. Thank you. Maher, you wanted to say something?
Right. So I wanted to say, just to add more on George's comments, and I agree with you. If you think about the ideation process or the design thinking process to create an actual prototype, what we've done in the past, to answer your question as well, Priscilla, what we've done in the past, and till today's date, actually, we went into a partnership with the academic institution to provide project-led courses where we integrate the ideation process, the prototyping with the business process, but also with a sustainability process. So it starts from day one, and this has to be taught at school. Whether it's early childhood to primary to secondary, or to college and universities, we are currently developing a program, an educational program, to integrate sustainability into everything that we're doing with the customers. And this is a good promotional campaign. Why? Because if you think about it, the return on investment is just tremendous if you integrate sustainability into your platform, into your core business. And we've done it with few limited courses. And I think one of you at early stages when we first started the webinar mentioned something about the Red Planet, Planet Mars. We've done some courses for the Red Planet. And the idea here is to make sure that the product, which is a sustainable product for the Red Planet, will see the light of day on planet Earth, which is the case. So we integrated sustainability with the ideation process and the business process. And some of the products that the students created, which is a fourth-year engineering students and master's degree engineering students from 3 different universities all over the world, it turns out that this product has the potential to become a startup, and this startup is currently it's becoming so efficient, so sustainable that it's generating so much revenue for them. But at the same time, this product, the life cycle of the product is becoming a little bit more longer, and it's not easy for others to disrupt them. And the only way for them to be disrupted is to get somebody who has a sustainability arm integrated within their system.
Mm. Yeah. Joe, you're doing like daily thought and daily work with young startups and young entrepreneurs. What do you think?
Well, there's a lot of interesting points that all of you raised. The one thing that Georg said is that, Georg, by the way, I'm following up on your point about education, by the way, in Austria.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. Goodbye. Well, actually, when I went to university, which is not all too long ago, but still quite some years, back then, climate change was not a topic at all. When I go to teach in front of usually that are engineers to become, engineers to be, they on the other hand are not being taught anything about sustainability. They are not even taught anything about how to set up their own businesses. And when I talk to these students that I give lectures to, then they are focused on having a very nice career within a very big corporate where they have zero responsibilities and zero impact. And I do feel that this is another narrative that we need to give to young people, to say you can take your fate and the fate of the planet basically in your hands. You can be self-employed, or you can do something yourself. You can contribute. The topic that we try to tackle is so complex that it needs so many complex ideas and innovations, and everyone can do his or her share and add his or her solution to it. I do feel that loads of these of the people or of the startups, they are not doing something bad to the planet, or they are not being voluntarily non-sustainable. They are just doing it because they don't know any better. So I feel that awareness raising and teaching, just like Maher was saying, integrating know-how in business, in classes, for schools, for students, but also for professionals, that is a way to go, because I don't know any better how 99.9% of the businesses in the world could improve their sustainability. But I do believe that if we empower people to think about their own niche, their own product line, their own processes, with a new perspective, from a sustainability, with a sustainability eye basically on it, well, that can tremendously change something. And if we are really rich, I mean, talking to everyone in the developed countries, if we are really rich, then we should invest our resources in leading that development and not waiting for someone else to do the dirty job. That's at least my understanding, because we have started to pollute massively. And now what makes me crazy, or what drives me crazy and mad here in Europe, is that we are pointing to each and every other country and region in the world, saying you need to do the job better, and then we will follow suit. And my answer to that is spread the word, teach people how to better do it, maybe do something that is not very common amongst Europeans, meaning starting your business yourself. And then eventually, if loads of people are doing that, I do have hopes for ourselves and our planet.
Thank you, Joe. I think like what you were saying about our engineers here not learning anything about sustainability and not learning anything about climate and actually the impact of how to do business in a sustainable way. That's so true. Like as an engineer coming from Europe, I couldn't agree more. And that's why I loved what I learned in Singularity. And like I know Raymond, both me and Lou like went together to the Global Solutions Program, and I know how Singularity had like such an impact to our mind shift. Like how it really helped us like turn, I don't know, like turn the perspective. Like Ray, what do you think? How can we actually like make this message to everyone? Like, if we could like sum up the GSP in like one sentence or something.
Which would be that would be a good trick right there. I would say one of the things that I have kind of come from, being so privileged to go through 10 years of the Global Solutions Program and meet all these incredible people like you guys who've come and attended and brought all of their talents to bear on these problems. One of the things that's so exciting that is now a trend I think so many people see is what you used to have a large national government's resources to tackle, and then it had to be a large company resources, and then smaller and smaller groups. Now a startup can do it, or somebody with a Kickstarter, an Indiegogo program can go ahead and pull some of these tools together where smaller and smaller groups of people can tackle really big problems. And one of the things, and this isn't so obvious, I mean, it actually sounds simplistic to say it, but what that really means is instead of having one or two groups working on some really big problems, one or two ways of thinking about something, you can have as many groups as there are individuals in the world. And so you don't have to have just one story. And like, how do we have one story that we share with everybody? Or how do we have, how can we get all nations on earth to do things a certain way? It really becomes more about how can we all pull together to try so many different things and then come back and share all of those best practices and go from there. So, and if I was going to say one thing, I think that's the wonderful thing. We've got 1,000 flowers, 100,000, 1,000,000 flowers blooming now. Different societies, nations, geographies will come up with different things that work for sustainability. And, some people it'll be banning plastic bags. Other people it'll be, no, we're reusing those plastic bags to carry produce to market. Other people will engineer little bio bugs to eat the plastic bags. And all of this works, and we'll just have to see what is appropriate.
I love the little bio plastic eating bugs.
That's always my favorite part.
Yeah.
I have to run. Thank you guys so much. It's been an exciting conversation.
Thank you. No, I really enjoyed this conversation, and like we are already passing through our next hour. I would really love to thank you all, and Storm, Lulu, Omar, Johannes, Raymond, Maher already left, and Georg. It was so lovely talking to all of you and sharing our birthday with you. And I really hope that we at least inspired one person to take this journey and to really start thinking about either restoring or revitalizing the whole schooling system and actually teaching kids about business and about entrepreneurship and about sustainability and actually all the efforts and the links that the governments play, especially in developing countries like China and UAE, and what developed countries like Austria had to take, or US, as a leading role in changing the way of the narrative. And I couldn't agree more with what Storm said at the beginning, that we can't have this sustainable way of living, because it's not. And if we keep on having it and maintaining it as sustainable, it won't lead us anywhere, but it's like losing 6 species a day that we haven't even yet discovered. So any last words, and we can like tune off.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.